Hello, and welcome to CubsPS Plus, a Northside numbers game, a weekly podcast that dives headfirst into the analysis of hot topics driving Chicago Cubs baseball. I'm your host, Mike Waller, a lifelong Cub fan, full-time baseball stat nerd, and sometime youth baseball coach. Thank you for being here today. I know you have a lot of choices. You can also find me on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube, all at CubsPS Plus, a spin on the baseball metric OPS Plus. If you can, please take 10 seconds and drop a rating or a review on Apple, Spotify, Pandora, Stitcher, or wherever it is you get your podcasts. If you've done that, thank you so much. Maybe you could share an episode with a friend. Just a few seconds on your end can help me get better and help other Cub fans find the show. You can also now help support the CubsPS Plus podcast by going to cubspsplus.patreon.com. There are 4 support tiers that come with added perks such as access to a private Discord discussion group, access to bonus episodes, merchandise discounts in the merch store that will launch in the coming weeks, and the ability to submit priority questions ahead of time for interview guests and more. Your support will help me keep this podcast ad-free. Welcome into episode 41. You're not as good as you are on your best day, and you're not as bad as you are on your worst. The Cubs are finding that out. After a terrible stretch of baseball, the Cubs are showing some life. It's been a much better week. After the Cubs got swept in LA, the Cubs took 2 of 3 from San Francisco, and then came home and beat the Pirates a couple of times before, wait for it, actually winning the last game of a series for a sweep. This week, I have a timely guest, with Matt Mervis back in Iowa and someone else going down tomorrow for Justin Steele. I have the voice of the Iowa Cubs, Alex Cohen, on to talk about the increasing gap between AAA and the major leagues. While we talk about individual players, Alex gives a great look into the approach of those guys living in between. Alex's love of the game shines in this interview, so give it a listen and share your thoughts. Are you ready? I'm ready. Here we go. Today I'm thrilled to be joined by the voice of the Iowa Cubs, Alex Cohen. Alex, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me on. Really appreciate it. Always fun to talk some baseball, especially when the season of baseball is coming with summer and it kind of feels like baseball, and I'm glad to talk about it.
And hey, the Cubs are on a win streak, both the Iowa Cubs and Chicago Cubs, so life is good.
They are. I mean, it's always fun when the Iowa Cubs and the Chicago Cubs win on the same day, and they've done it on back-to-back days. So it's been a lot of good baseball over the last week or so.
Yeah, let's keep that rolling. So you're new to this show, so you may be new to some of my audience. How did you wind up with the Iowa Cubs?
Yeah, so I've been broadcasting in minor league baseball for 13 years, just kind of going up through the ranks like the players do. You know, I've called games at rookie ball, single A, double A, and triple A with Iowa. So I actually wasn't as much of a linear path for me. I started with the Huntsville Stars, the double A affiliate of the Milwaukee Brewers. Was with them for 2 years, and the team got sold. Then I worked in the media relations broadcasting department off air for a year with the Oakland Athletics. That was back in 2014. Realized that I missed having a microphone in front of my face way too much. So then I went back to the broadcasting route and kind of just started from the bottom up. Went to the Australian Baseball League for a year, broadcasting games for the Melbourne Aces in Melbourne, Australia. Came back, worked for the Rookie League affiliate for the Kansas City Royals, the Idaho Falls Chuckers for a year, then 2 years with the Bowling Green Hot Rods, single A affiliate for the Tampa Bay Rays, and now 6 years with the Iowa Cubs, AAA affiliate for the Chicago Cubs. And I got the iCubs job in a fairly traditional way. They opened up a position. I knew that they did. I sent in my stuff. About 200 people applied for the position.
Wow.
The process took about 3 weeks. I got the job Thanksgiving 2017, moved to Des Moines December 14th, 2017, and it was negative 14 degrees. So that was quite the introduction to Des Moines, Iowa, but I've been here for the last 5, almost 6 years, and I've loved every second of it.
That's great. Yeah, welcome to Iowa with those temperatures. I grew up there, and that's part of the reason.
They say that there's 4 seasons in Iowa. That doesn't seem to be the case. I feel like last week it was 30 degrees and it was 95 yesterday. So.
Yeah, the weather is one of the reasons I moved to the South, and I like those weather differences. So today we're going to talk about I've heard you on with Greg Huss. We're not going to dig as deep into the prospects as he does. They do great work on Cubs on Deck, but I want to talk about kind of that life we see, the guys who are just in the bigs or the guys who get sent down for a reset. And I guess given yesterday's transactions with Cody Bellinger being activated and Matt Mervis being sent down, let's start with Mash.
Sure.
So he's a guy who, for background, the Cubs drafted him or did not draft him in 2020. He would have been drafted if it had been a normal draft year. Signed him as an undrafted free agent. Kind of had a probably not that spectacular 2021, but then shot up the ranks last year and got to a point where it really looked like he had nothing left to prove at AAA. Get to the big, struggled. And I think we've seen a lot of that this year. So talk to me about the difference between AAA and the major leagues and those guys who have a huge amount of success, go up, struggle, and then have to figure things out after that.
Well, I mean, you see it really with any position, any player, any situation. Anthony Rizzo coming up through the organization, who, Matt Mervis was compared to early on. Anthony Rizzo came up, debuted, struggled. He was optioned twice. He was optioned with San Diego, and then he was optioned with the Cubs. And Kyle Schwarber, he had immediate success early, and then he got optioned. Ian Happ got optioned after a year and a half up at the big leagues. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you come down here for a reset to come here in front of 5,000 people instead of 50 to work on your mechanics and not be under such scrutiny. Sometimes just need to see more pitches, go through another process. Sometimes you're experimenting with the new position, with the new skill set, with the new mentality. So I think for Matt coming down here just to play every day, not underneath the bright lights of Wrigley Field, and work on not chasing as many pitches out of the zone, which I actually think he did pretty well the last week of the season, or the last week that he was up there. But, the difference is I think the Chicago Cubs, when they're 9 games back, there's different expectations than when they're 3.5 games back.
Yeah, for sure.
So, being able to come down here and play every day and get the ABs and go through what he learned up there and come down here and work with hitting coach John Maley on, what he did well, let's do more of that. What he didn't do as well, let's work on that. So, I think with Matt that he's a big leaguer, and I think that he'll probably be up later in the season. But right now, with Cody Bellinger being deficient health wise, and really he can only play one position right now to work that knee back. That's first. Well, that's a position that Matt Mervis plays. So you got to have your $21 million man up there and Cody Bellinger in the lineup if you can have him 3.5 games back in the division. And I think that Matt being down here, it'll help for him.
So how did the players approach that when, I thought Matt had a really good last week. I mean, the last game he played, he had that really good at bat, wound up with a really hard contact line drive. It was out, but it was hard contact oppo, which is always a good sign.
Yeah.
When they feel like they're there, I guess the players, I'm sure, obviously they want to be in the bigs. Is there a lot of frustration in going back and forth? Especially like Matt had to wait a while because...
No, that's a really good question. And I think it really depends on who the player is and at what juncture they are in their career. Matt's a pretty objective guy. He's somebody who's pretty logical, doesn't really buy into the drama in the comments. And I think Matt could rationalize like, you know what? I was hitting under 200. I was striking out at a 30% clip. I can come back down here and really work on some stuff. And I think that he recognizes that there is stuff to work on. He builds off the stuff that he succeeded over the last week. But I think that coming off his first call-up, if you're getting option for a guy like Cody Bellinger as a 2-time All-Star MVP and is on a 1-year deal, I think he can rationalize that. But I think there's certain players in certain spots, depending on if they've been up and down before, if you're 25 or 30. Like if you're 35, you're going to think differently than when you're 25. I think Matt, on his first big league extended stint coming back down here, I think he knows that this is not the last chance for him to develop at the big league level. I think that he knows that the Cubs have a long-term void at first base, and he's the first person with the opportunity to get it, and he will get more opportunities to obtain that position. So I think Matt, I haven't talked to him yet, but I think Matt will be very rational about it. But there are certain players that really struggle with it because I think it's their last time up in the big leagues, or they ruined their first opportunity in the big leagues, and that fans are upset, and the front office is upset, and the managerial staff is upset. So it really just depends on the player.
And how would that contrast with, let's say, a guy like Miles Mastrobuoni? So the Cubs got him from the Rays. He hit through every level of the Rays system. The Cubs trade for him. Mm-hmm. He gets put in right field probably a little unfairly for Seiya Suzuki when Chicago decided to take 2 outfielders on their opening day roster. He's been one that I know has gotten a lot of the fans' ire. And then the Cubs sent him down and he hit again. Like he posted a 155 WRC plus in Iowa, back up, and he's struggling. Like, how does a guy like that work through maybe being a 4A player and being stuck when I think he knows he can do it?
I think he knows he can do it. Miles is 28, and the fact is, like, you make a really good living being a 4A player. A
That's
guy
true.
with big league experience, and I can't imagine if he gets sent down here, he'll be particularly happy because I talked to Miles. He's very intense, very intelligent guy. He thinks that he can contribute at the big league level, even if he is hitting 200, 220. I mean, the caliber of at bat, the defensive versatility, the on base percentage. I think that Miles thinks that he's a big league player. I do too. But there's just not enough big league teams for all the big league players that are in professional baseball. So if he is a 4A player, if he is going back and forth from the big leagues to AAA, guess what? You can make a pretty good living doing that. So I would call that a successful career from a professional baseball standpoint. No, the majority of the fans don't, but just knowing where Miles came from, a mid-round draft pick with the Rays, and just methodically hit his way up through the organization. I actually had Miles on my 2017 Bowling Green Hot Rods team as a single-A middle infielder. And Miles was always happy, confident, but to say that 6 years later, a mid-round draft pick from 2015 as a fringe big leaguer, I would call that a career success.
Yeah, I would too. I don't know if you grew up playing baseball. I played badly in high school. Yeah, exactly. Always wished I was better. And just watching the levels, and I go out and I watch high school baseball around here. We have the White Sox AAA team, get to Wrigley, and I mean the caliber of baseball just leaps at every level.
Yeah.
So one of the things, we lined this interview up maybe a week or so ago, and a couple nights ago I was listening to Boog and Joe Girardi talk, and they start talking about guys like Christopher Morel being sent down and how you go down sometimes. You rise up through the system, and they were not centering this on Morel, but I'll use him as an example. So he got the bump up from AA last year and hit the ground running. I mean, what did he get? Reach base 22, 23 straight games when he first came up.
Yeah, for 3 weeks, and it was a borderline Rookie of the Year candidate for the first half of the year.
Yeah. And then you get sent down, and he was crushing the ball so well at the beginning of the season in Iowa. And Girardi was talking about how sometimes you go down and maybe you have to work on strikeout rate, or you have to work on laying off certain pitches. But when you're facing inferior pitching, you just get pitches to hit, and you just go and you go and you go, and you put up big numbers, and you go back up and you realize nothing has really changed. Is there a big emphasis on that in Iowa when these guys come back down? Is there a lot of focus on making sure they do the work they're supposed to do, or is that really up to the individual?
No, there's an emphasis on that. I think they come down with a plan. For Morel, a lot of it is just confidence based. Come down with a smile on your face, and hitting well is contagious. So if that type of hitting, even against semi-inferior competition down here, which I don't think it's all that much. I mean, there's location that's probably the major difference between AAA and the big leagues, not stuff, but Christopher Morel sees a 99-mile-per-hour fastball come in, sees 110 off the bat coming out, and hitting 452 feet. He's like, you know what? They throw 99-mile-per-hour fastballs up in the big leagues too, so I can do that. So I think with Morel, it's just confidence breeds production. Somebody here that he came down here, he hit over 300. He was leading all AAA in home runs. You bring him up, and now he's on pace for a 40 home run season as a 24-year-old infielder. So I think specifically for him was just getting at bats, getting back to his confident Christopher Morel self. He's a rhythm hitter, so if he feels good, swings good, he is good. So,
and that rhythm hitter, especially for guys who are maybe fluctuating, like you guys had Nick Madrigal down for 10 days, maybe hit about 600. And,
no big deal.
No big deal.
On 6 doubles, turned into the Jose Altuve and triple.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Excuse me. So some guys I think play better, obviously, if they're in the lineup every day. They see pitches every day. But then sometimes the reality is those at-bats may not be there in the major leagues.
Yeah.
And how do you see, when you talk to those guys, what do they talk about the difference being in terms of mental approach? I imagine that's something they have to learn.
They do. It's really tough not to play every day when these guys coming up through high school baseball, college baseball, minor leagues. If you're in the big leagues, odds are you were playing every day in high school baseball, in college baseball, and in minor league baseball. So it's a completely new skill set. I think for Nick Madrigal, it's a little bit different because he has such I won't call it a complex approach at the plate, but it's finite. Like you don't see many strikeouts, you don't see many walks. It is see ball, hit ball. So his skill sets, it actually on paper works out for a bench role, because if you bring a guy off the bench, you want him to make contact. You want a competitive at bat, and that's why he was drafted 4th overall, to make contact and to have competitive at bats. So you just have to know your skill set and know why you're being brought into the game. Situationally, you're down by 3, runners at first and third, 1 out. Probably want to drive the baseball. You probably want to put a ball into the gap. You want to put a good swing on it. You want to try to tie up the game or bring the team closer. If you're coming in the game, 3-2 game, 9th inning, nobody out, leading off the inning, you probably want to try to get on base. Probably want to try to take pitches. So it's really all situationally, and it takes time for these guys to learn that. But when you're a cerebral player like Nick Madrigal, who has a defined skill set of making contact and putting the ball where he wants to, especially on the ground, I think it's a little bit easier for those players.
Yeah, I can see that. Let's move on to I guess at the peak level, you've got the different kinds of players. You got, I guess the best case scenario would be your Chris Bryants or Nico Horners, just, fly through the system, get to the bigs, stick, have a career, get a contract. Those guys, probably don't need to talk a lot about those, but I would imagine those guys can also put pressure on the players that they're passing. So when you're maybe like a Jared Young, he had a really good year last year, got a cup of coffee in Chicago. It was probably pretty obvious by midseason that Matt Mervis was coming. Like, how do those guys deal with that?
They learn how to be more versatile. You look at Jared and he says, oh man, now we got the top 5 prospect in the organization coming up. I need to do something to stick out. And that was Jared going to the coach to say, hey, I could play third base too. And I was drafted as a second baseman. And let me take fly balls in right field and left field. Let me give you a reason to still put me in the lineup, even when we do have these prospects here and have to put them in the lineup. And that's exactly what Jared did. Jared this year has played first, second, third, left, right, and DH. So that gives you more opportunities to be put in the lineup. And Jared now has a 985 OPS this year. He just had a 10-game hitting streak snapped. He was hitting 444 over the last week with 4 bombs. So if you hit well, they'll find a place to put you in the lineup. And especially if you go to the coach and say, hey, I want to be more versatile. I know that they have top prospects in the organization at every position in the outfield and first base. So, let me try to find somewhere else to play. And I think third base last year is what he did.
Well, I think third base is obviously a place that the Cubs have struggled with the last couple of years. Patrick Wisdom has had his ups and downs. Nick Madrigal's had ups and downs. And that's just this year. Before this year, Nick wasn't even a third baseman. But obviously with Nico Horner at second base, the playing time has dwindled at that position. I know Jake Slaughter's having a good year. Christopher Morel, I think, played a little bit of third base when he was at Iowa, right?
Yeah, I mean, he played majority outfield, played a little bit of second, played a game at short. I mean, he also moved around a lot, but yeah, he played some third. Jake Slaughter has played more third since he's left. Jared Young a little bit, David Bodie a little bit as well.
Yeah, David Bodie's another one. He's been up and down really since probably your entire time.
I've had David every single year that I've been with the iCubs, so 2018 to 2023, and it's been really nice seeing the career of David. I mean, everyone's like, oh, well, he had his chance, and I see some comments on Twitter, it's like, well, he blew it. He didn't really blow it. He had 4 years of big league experience from a guy who was drafted out of community college in 2012. So if you draft a guy, middle round, I think he was 18th round draft pick, 2012 out of community college. Are you expecting him to be a 4-year big leaguer or a 2-WAR player in 2019 when you're making $990,000? I don't think that's the expectation. So if you look at the career of David Bodie, you won that. You won that draft pick. You won that contract. So just seeing him here with the amount of clarity that he has in his career and how good of a teammate he's been, played everywhere in the lineup, hit everywhere in the lineup. It's been really nice having him here, and it's been nice seeing David do so well in his career. He's one of the good guys.
Well, and he hears so many great things. I think it would be very easy for somebody in his position who's had the chances and been back down to almost be better at this point. But it sounds like he's really a guy who's a mentoring figure for the young players.
It's the opposite. Yeah, I mean, there are some players that come down here on the back legs of their career, or the back nine, so to speak, that – they're bitter. They're upset that they're down here. They question themselves. They question their careers. They question the coach, and they question everything. And I think David being down here this year where he knows that he's getting a guaranteed salary and he's providing for his family and his wife and 3 kids. And I think he's come down here with the right mentality, and he's really done everything this team has asked for and infinitely more.
Cool. Now, when you look at the younger levels of the minor leagues, everybody is on the up, right? You're either moving up or you're getting past and you're out of baseball.
Yep.
You get to AAA, there's so much more back and forth. This year, between what I've seen from Nick Madrigal and Miles Mastrobuoni and some of these guys, it seems like the difference between Major League Baseball and AAA, especially on the offensive side, is getting wider by the year. Is that something that you see as well?
I do. I think that pitching-wise, there's a main difference. I mean, at the AAA level, even at the AA level, I mean, there's stuff. I mean, you have guys throwing 100. You have right-handed bullpen arms averaging 97 miles per hour, but it's just competitive at-bats, location and secondary pitches. I think Nick Madrigal actually coming down here and being able to play every day and just get into a rhythm that's helped him. Since he's come up, he has a 400 on-base percentage. So he's drawn more walks than he has struck out. So but I do think that the main difference is caliber of pitching, balls that are in the strike zone, and competitive balls. I mean, it's also easier here at the AAA level to take pitches because you have an automatic strike zone for the first year. That has definitely simplified the approach where guys can live in that box, go look at data and say, hey, you're going to swing here and you're not going to swing here. And I think that's really helped certain players. I think it's really helped Jared Young. His chase rate has dropped exponentially. His walks have increased exponentially. So I think the automatic strike zone at the AAA level has made an interesting addition to this, where it's actually given the hitters the advantage. They don't have that in the big leagues.
No, it doesn't sound like we'll have it next year either.
I don't think they will. I really do think that the challenge system plays. I think that's something that if you talk to every player here, guys that have come down on major league rehab, guys that have had big league experience, consensus, they need to bring that up to the big leagues.
Yeah, I mean, I remember a game, I saw the umpire scorecard afterwards, and the umpire scorecard was not super lopsided, but there were Ian Happ and Seiya Suzuki both got called out on 3-2 pitches that were objectively off the plate.
Yeah. Go to the helmet.
Reverse those, and all of a sudden, the pitcher's throwing another 15 pitches in the first inning, guys on base.
Well, also, it's not as much of an indictment on the umpire. I mean, we had a game this year, we saw 365 pitches. Yeah. And you have 3 challenges from both teams. All right, let's say you do 6 challenges. 4 are accepted. That is 4 wrong calls out of 365 pitches. I mean, that's still, 97%? Yes. Like, it's okay to make 4 mistakes in a span of 9 innings. Like, I don't think an indictment, as much of an indictment on the umpires as many would think.
I actually think both the review system and some of those umpire scorecards actually highlight how good they are.
I would agree. I was looking at Pat Hoberg's the other night, and it was spectacular. I mean, it was, these guys are throwing 95-mile-per-hour cutters and 102-mile-per-hour two-seamers, and Yohan Duran's throwing 105, and you don't know where it's landing. And and I think just seeing these guys calling correct games at a 95, 97% clip, I mean, I would take that on any of my high school tests, college tests. Jeez.
I mean, it's easy to watch and see the screen, right? The ball did or did not go in the box, but
but when you have 105-mile-per-hour projectile, your face is a little bit different.
And the movement on those is just insane.
It's crazy.
Earlier in my podcast, I had interviewed David Da Silva, one of the mental skills coaches with the Cubs, and he had talked about some of the things they're doing through the system. I mean, do you see? I imagine the AAA is a group that really gets a lot of kind of mental skills attention because of that pressure and the having to adjust to going back and forth. Have you seen a change over the last couple of years in terms of how the players handle that?
Yeah, I mean, I actually think the Cubs have been ahead of the game when it comes to mental skills and mental health, and providing the mental acuity to deal with the AAA shuffle, the I-80 drive from Des Moines to Chicago. I think the Cubs have been ahead of it in recognizing, especially with a high payroll, large market, deep fanhood franchise type of team, there's a lot that comes with that. So, I mean, there have been mental health, mental skills professionals here since I started in 2018. So I think the Cubs have been one ahead of that, and I think the players have taken advantage of those resources.
That's great. Let's talk about pitching for a few minutes. So we've talked a lot about the hitters. On the pitching side, there's always, there's not as much shuffling of hitters typically. I mean, you have injuries and rehabs and stuff like that, but there's always the bullpen shuttles. Especially now you got the limitation of 13 pitchers on the staff.
Yeah.
You have a bad week, you get blown out a couple times, you burn that bullpen, you got to shuffle some guys back and forth. And we've seen this year, I think some guys kind of take a step back that we were excited about last year. Keegan Thompson for one, Manny Rodriguez, I know he's been coming off a big arm injury. Estrada just got sent back down after having some struggles. Like, what's life like for those relievers who probably often know they're going up just for, they may only be going up for a week or two?
It's tough. I mean, they go for a week or two, and then they are in a completely different role. So, odds are the relievers here at the AAA level that are 7th, 8th, 9th, high leverage guys are going up to the big leagues, and they're not high leverage guys. So it's thrusted in a different role. Here at the AAA level, if you're a high leverage guy, you're pitching every other day. If you're not in the big leagues, especially with the off days, you're pitching every 4th day. So just getting into the routine, and the Cubs have a lot of guys who were starters, now relievers in one role, relievers going to another role. So it's a lot of learning on the fly. Remember, Jeremiah Estrada, starter, coming up through the organization, then thrust into the bullpen, and here was an 8th inning guy and goes up as a 6th inning guy. So you have to use a different arsenal of pitches. Hitters or different approaches of the game. It takes an adjustment point for that. So and then now here at the AAA level, the caliber of arm in the time that I've been here since 2018 has changed dramatically. You look at the Outcomes bullpen now. Daniel Palencia comes in, gets his first career save yesterday. His first fastball was 99.7 miles per hour. Bailey Horn came in through an inning and a third, struck out 3, left-handed, great curveball, fastball at 97.5 miles per hour. Every single arm in this bullpen, Manny Rodriguez, 98. Cam Sanders, 99. Nick Birdie, 100. Daniel Palencia hit 101. When I first got here in Iowa in 2018, there was one right-handed pitcher who threw over 98 miles per hour, and that was Dylan Maples. Now you have everybody on the roster who throws over 98 miles per hour. It's a completely different, skill set, arsenal of pitching that this Cubs bullpen has, and that this organization bullpen has. I mean, they brought up a couple arms, bring up Ryan Jensen, first-round draft pick, put him in the bullpen. He's throwing 97. It's so crazy.
Well, I think that was a big change 2019 when they overhauled the pitching infrastructure. They had gotten to the point where all these teams were bringing out these young arms throwing 99, and the Cubs just didn't have that anywhere. Yeah. But now I think we're starting to see it. Those guys who came in the system and got transitioned from maybe being starters to relievers are hitting AAA now.
It's crazy. I mean, we had Hunter Biggie throw his second AAA outing yesterday. Hunter Biggie, 12th round draft pick from Harvard, 6 foot, 205 pounds. And his first fastball is 97.2 miles per hour. And you're just like, oh my goodness. Like, the caliber of arm talent now and arm health now is just so different from when I started in baseball 13 years ago. And when I joined the Cubs organization 5 years ago, it's been a complete overhaul.
Yeah. Well, and I felt bad for Nick Birdie. I mean, I was following him in Iowa, and he was having a great run, got up to Chicago, struggled his first outing, but then had a good outing, and then the appendectomy, and now he's just set back for a while.
It's tough. I mean, he's had a really tough injury history, but I will say having the appendectomy when you're on the 60-day big league IL, it's a little bit more lucrative, and it puts you in a better
situation. That's probably the right place to
It's a small win in a tough situation.
That's true. So what have you seen from like Keegan Thompson? So Keegan Thompson's, you talk about changing roles. I mean, he came up a starter, went to the pen, became a starter, went back to the pen as a long guy. And I think he's, at least from where I sit, he's struggled to pitch back-to-back days or recover quickly. Do you think his struggles this year are because of that constant change in role, or is...
No, I don't think so. I think that, starting spring training, throwing 91, 92 miles per hour, maybe he tried to change mechanically and show some more deception. And then once he got his stuff back, now he's throwing 94 to 96. He topped out at 96.4 the other day. Things got rewired a little bit. I think they got a little convoluted. So coming back down here, I think he's actually looked really good in his last 2 outings. And it's just been a shift in pitch shape. I mean, in years past, fastball cutter with a little bit of curveball. His curveball's been his best pitch down here. So now it's reframing that mindset that, maybe the cutter that was my best pitch over the last 2 years, that could be my secondary pitch. And that I could throw a curveball, which has been, you look at the metrics on his curveball since he's been here, it's been disgusting. So it's like, maybe I have to rewire it. Maybe I go fastball curveball now. And secondarily, I go cutter. So I think it's just recognizing the adaptation of the stuff that you have, some stuff that's falling off, some stuff that's peaking up, over the course of a career and a season and adapting that way. I think Keegan's looked much better than his line is down here.
Okay.
I think especially against right-handed hitters, he's been pretty dominant. He's left a couple fastballs over the plate, but I think over his last 3 outings, it's been 94, 96 with good fastball placement. The strikeouts are up, the velocity is up, the spin on the curveball is up. I think the stuff is playing better. I wouldn't be surprised to see him back up in the big league soon. I think he's looked pretty good.
That's good. I was wondering when he went down, because the Cubs have so many arms at AAA, I think it's been easier to just let him stay and get the work he needs and get right versus.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that, as I said, I think throwing 91 to 92 and trying to overcompensate for that in spring training and go up to the big leagues March 30th when it's freezing and make sure that you're productive. And now, it's getting warmer, the body's feeling better. Now your stuff is 94 to 96 and you're throwing you're 91 to 92. It's just different. So I think coming here and having a mental reset and being able to talk to Ron Vallone as a 15-year big league veteran and say, hey, man, you're good. I don't care that you gave up 4 runs in your first AAA outing. This says you're good. Let's just work on one thing next outing, work on one thing the outing after that, and a month from now you'll be in the big leagues.
I've heard so many good things about Ron Vallone.
It's the best. I mean, pitching coaches by nature are a lot of fun, whether they're career minor leaguers or 15-year big leaguers. He is my favorite pitching coach I've had in 13 years, and there's not a close second. And I think that the players will say that as well. Just to have somebody who has started opening day in the big leagues, has closed games in the big leagues, who's thrown a middle relief in the big leagues, who's gone on the AAA big league 4A shuttle. I mean, he's done it all. So if you're upset about what's going on, if you're confused, that's a really good guy to go to.
Yeah. I remember watching him with the Reds, and I would watch him and think this guy's not that good, but he would beat the Cubs all the time.
He would beat the Cubs all the time because he's just such a competitor.
Yep.
I mean, he's just going to go out there and say, you know what? I'm going to throw my best stuff. You hit it, you can rename it. It's like the Rick Wild Thing Bond mentality.
Yep, exactly. Let's talk about Caleb Killian a little bit. So he's a guy that was pretty hyped when the Cubs traded Chris Bryant. And obviously when you're traded you're the return for Chris Bryant along with Canario.
Yeah.
That adds some extra pressure. You're not just a guy coming up through the system. And then he had that electric fall, and then got his taste last year. Had a pretty good first start, I thought, and then got knocked around a little bit. And this year, he's had a couple looks. I was really impressed his last start in Chicago. He gave up, 5-6 runs in that first inning.
But then he second and third, yeah.
Yeah, and then he managed to get into the fourth. I think gave up a couple more in the fourth and got knocked out. But I thought he showed some mental toughness maybe I hadn't seen from him before. Yeah. How's he been back to Iowa? Because he's got to be a frustrated guy.
I think that he knows that he has to work on stuff down here. Ever since he's been back down here, he's really limited the walks. I mean, his last outing, which was yesterday, he did walk a couple in the first inning. I think he ended up walking 4, but didn't walk anybody the rest of the game. And prior to that, didn't walk anybody in his last start. He went 6 innings against St. Paul in an outing that they really needed him to go 5 or 6. It was coming off a doubleheader, one that went extra innings. They basically went to Caleb and be like, we need you to give us 5, give us 6. And he gave him 6. So that type of toughness is not something that we've seen from him before. I think that he's a tough guy, but when you have your first sense of failure and you do it in the big leagues last year, that's tough.
Yes.
All throughout his professional career, he was a stud. When he was at Texas Tech, he was a stud. So, having that first taste of failure, having it in the big leagues last year, probably tough on him. It'd be tough on anybody. And then just losing your control a little bit. But here, I mean, he's starting to realize that, I have good secondaries, need to control them, but when I want 98, I can reach back and throw 98. And that's a powerful tool to have as a pitcher. So I think that he's somebody that factors into the Cubs organization long term. I think with a fastball that tops out at 99, you have some versatility there. If you need a long guy out of the bullpen, if you need to make him an 8th or 9th inning guy, you can go try to do that. I mean, there's a lot more to do when you can throw 99 from the right side than you do throwing 95. So
that's for sure.
There are still pretty plentiful, and he's still working on stuff. And I think he's come down here with a really good mindset, and he's pitching more like the Caleb Killian who went scoreless in Miami in the second and the third inning. So
that's great. How's it been? I know last year Alec Mills was down a lot and coming back from injury, and I don't think he's with the team at the moment, but a guy like that who you probably saw him almost every year that you were
Yeah.
with the Cubs until this year. How do guys like that play into helping develop these young pitchers?
Really depends on where they are at their career. Alec, when he was down here in 2018, I mean, he was hungry. He was trying to get back up to the big leagues and trying to, make his role as a member of the Cubs. So there was a big competition layer. When he came down here last year, I mean, he was a mentor. He was a guy who had thrown a no-hitter up at the big leagues. He's a guy who has 3 years of big league service time. So when you have that crutch and you have that foundation, it's a lot easier to go to younger pitchers and be like, hey, you know what? I'm Alec Mills. I throw 89 to 92, and I throw a no-hitter up in the big leagues. Let's talk about baseball. And the guy's like, you know what? Okay, that's fine. Let's do that. And it's a lot easier to talk to players like that than in 2018 when Alec had made one big league appearance with the Royals organization, trying to work his way back up, and other guys on the team are more competition and not as much teammates.
That's true. I guess speaking of, I imagine when Kyle Hendricks was down for a month this year, there were a lot of pitchers hanging around him, picking his brain.
He was spectacular. I've seen a lot of major league rehabbers come through here with Iowa over the last 5 years and just in general. And for the most part, they're great. He was the best. And that is not hyperbolic. I mean, he was the first one in the clubhouse, playing cards with the players, first guy in the dugout, shaking hands, meeting with the media, doing everything that the media needed, that the organization needed. I mean, he was the perfect rehabber to have down here, with a young pitching staff, with young arms, and he was the best rehabber I've had.
It sounds like he and Miguel Amaya really hit it off down there.
Well, that was the first thing that he said. I mean, he was just like, this guy's going to be a catcher in the big leagues for a long time. And go figure, 3 weeks later, Kyle Hendricks was a one-hitter and Miguel Amaya is the catcher.
Well, and Miguel's an interesting case too, because he's looked really good in the majors since he's been up, and he went up and came back down. But he's a guy, because of all of his injury history, because of all the missed time. I mean, he hasn't played a full season since 2018. Mm-hmm. I know there's some question about, is it better for him to be in Chicago because that's where his skill set belongs, or would he be better off being at Iowa and catching every day, getting that workload and kind of balancing that out? But what did you guys? It's so cool to see him back as a prospect. Like he was like the number one guy, and you forget that he's only 23, 24 now.
24. He's 24 years old and a catcher with the experience level of a 21-year-old. And yeah, people forget 2019, number one prospect in the organization, top 50 prospect in all minor league baseball. 2020, when they didn't play, that would have been a huge year for him.
Yeah.
Probably would have made it up to the big leagues. So just seeing him come back from injury, really improved defensively, framing, throwing. I mean, you come back from an arm injury and you're a catcher, you don't really know what's going to take shape, and everything took shape in a positive way. And I was talking to our manager, Marty Peavy, about it, and he's obviously former catcher up in the big leagues, former catching coordinator, 40 years of experience. And he said, one, he has changed mentally a 180 from when he saw him in spring training in 2019 and 2020 in a good way. He's just matured. And he said, like, the Chicago Cubs have a lot of prospects right now. Miguel Amaya is the one who's going to impact the big leagues right now in the best possible way. He was, for a catching coordinator, and he's pretty strict when it comes to catching, and I won't say not complimentary, but he has pretty good standards for catching excellence. He was really impressed with Miguel Amaya.
Yeah, he absolutely looks the part. And it's
done. It's tough for me to say, he's going to be an all-star in the big leagues. I think he can be an all-star in the big leagues.
He carries himself that way for sure.
He does, with a smile on his face. He's positive. And when you have Kyle Hendricks, Hayden Wesneski, Justin Steele all saying that they love working with him and they want to work with him, for a 24-year-old catcher with 3 weeks of big league experience, that's saying a lot.
Yes. Well, he's catching Hendricks today.
Yeah.
Well, and he was a bit of a wake-up call, and so is Brendan Davis. And here we are almost 40 minutes into a talk about AAA, and we haven't talked about Brendan Davis yet. But because of the way the injuries happened, because those guys came up so fast, so young, it's, I didn't give up on Amaya, but at some point with all the injuries he stacked up, you had to wonder, how's he going to come back? He's going to keep working on it, but we'll see. It's very easy to forget how young these guys actually are. I think Brendan Davis is still
the youngest
23,
player on
right?
the Iowa Cubs team, and he's 23. Yeah.
Yeah. So like those guys, like, what's Brendan Davis fighting through right now? I mean, I know he's got some sort of physical issue now, and we don't have to get into that. But
there's a pro and a con to this. Obviously, like you don't want to see a guy go through an injury for the second straight year. But the pro is it's not the same injury. It's not the back.
That's good.
It's lower body, and they're actually still evaluating it to see what exactly it is. It doesn't appear to be overly serious, especially when you had a very serious back injury last year that he came back about 2 months earlier than most people anticipated. So it's not that same injury. It's a shame for Brendan because the last 10 games before he got hurt, he was starting to swing it. He had a double to right center here at Principal Park, I think like 2 or 3 days before he got hurt. And that was the first time I'm like, all right, like he might be back like that. Like he took a really tough pitch and just roped it. I think it was like 107 off the bat to right center. I'm like, all right, like we're getting somewhere here. Obviously, you don't want to miss that time, but it's not a back injury; it's a lower body injury, and something that he can hopefully come back from sooner rather than later. As of right now.
Okay, well, hopefully that's the case. He's been fun to watch, so I'd love to see him get back to action, just like Amaya has.
He's a great kid, man. He's wired right.
Yeah, really, that's all I've ever heard about him.
Yeah, he's just wired. What you want a big leaguer and somebody to represent your organization to be, that is Brendan Davis.
It's got to be interesting, that outfield. I mean, they've had so many guys. And now Alexander Canario is coming back from that injury, and he seems to be making good strides at this point. I think he's ahead of schedule as well. Yeah,
he's about a month and a half ahead of schedule. Talking about fun to watch. A guy hits 37 home runs last year, and the ball just sounds a little bit different coming off his bat. Just a little bit different.
It had to be fun to have him and MASH in the same lineup. And
I mean, the last month of the year, they were going back and forth of the Cubs' organizational lead in home runs and almost being minor league baseball's lead in home runs. So Canario with a home run, Mervis with a home run. Canario hit 3 in Omaha, Mervis hit a home run the next day. So that's so much power. One from the right side, one from the left side. And with Canario coming back and Mervis being optioned here, and seeing Pete Crow Armstrong hit grand slams to center field in Birmingham. I mean, there is so much outfield talent in this organization. The fact that Nelson Velasquez is here in the minor leagues, just 24 years old, he screams big leaguer to me. He had a home run yesterday. He had 2 doubles and a home run yesterday, and I think the home run might be hovering around like midway right now in Chicago. He hit it so far. So there is so much outfield depth in this organization. They've done a really good job of identifying talent at that position.
Well, and that's going to be really interesting to follow because obviously the Cubs just extended the in-hap. They've got Seiya Suzuki signed for 3 more years after this one. PCA seems like the heir apparent in center field, but who knows? They could potentially re-sign Cody Bellinger.
Yeah. You have our Gold Glove center fielder, former MVP, 2-time All-Star, who's really taken the Cubs fan base by storm and playing towards his MVP level and not the one of 2021 or 2022.
Yeah. And I have to imagine that it's been different the last 2 years with the Cubs being out of contention, selling off parts. There are more opportunities for guys to come up. Like, I wonder how the mindset's changed this year where some of those spots now are kind of locked up. And if there are deals made at the deadline, maybe some of them get traded off for other pieces or over the offseason.
Yeah, when you're 3.5 back in June in a division that's definitely winnable, your organization trade deadline wise is really trying to figure it out. It changes day by day. One day you're a buyer. Right now they're probably buyers. In a week they could be sellers. This is a pretty crucial stretch here for the Cubs. And last year you saw players when they were out of contention. Jared Young make his big league debut, and unfortunately, right now, it doesn't seem like there's a path for a guy like that who made his big league debut, played for Team Canada in the World Baseball Classic, and is raking down here. There's not really an active path for him to do that up in the big leagues right now because you have those 2 outfielders who are going to play every day that are signed long-term. You have Cody Bellinger back. Guess what? He's on a 1-year prove-it deal. He's playing every day. Trey Mancini, experienced player, signed him a 2-year deal. He's playing pretty much every day, especially against left-handed pitching. So then you have Nico Horner, just signed a long-term deal at second. Dansby Swanson, best shortstop in the National League. Where are these guys going to play?
Yeah. It's a good problem for the Cubs to have. And I know there's been some frustration with fans with the way some of the bottom half of the rosters performed. When Miles hasn't hit and Nick hasn't hit and Patrick Wisdom's had his struggles. But it does seem like the talent is really, I know 2 years ago we were looking saying, well, hey, there's a lot of talent here, but it's at Myrtle Beach and it's at South Bend. And now a lot of it's going to Iowa.
Yeah, now it's up. You have Nelson Velasquez as your here's AAA starting center fielder, then he comes up to the big leagues and he drives in 6 in a game and he hits a grand slam. I mean, there are guys here right now that you bring them up to the big leagues right now, they can perform at the AA level. Owen Casey, start of his season, Pete Crow Armstrong, his last 3 weeks. They're studs. I mean, this organization has true studs for really the first time since, KB, Javi, Rizzo, Schwartz, all them. So,
well, another guy I wanted to ask you about was Mike Tauchman. So I looked at his numbers. Not a huge change. He's basically doing in Chicago what he did in Iowa.
Yep.
And he's not flashy. He's not, obviously he's been in the bigs before. He's been around a long time. But when you look at, the fans get excited about Velasquez or Morel or, the big young guys, but Tauchman just goes out there and puts out a good at bat, plays a good solid center field, something spectacular center field. I mean, that catch he made for Hendricks last start was just phenomenal.
Well, even 2 nights ago, he had a catch in the gap in left center that capped the comeback. So I mean, you hit the nail on the head. It's just a pro at bat. I mean, in a sport where you fail 65% of the time, don't get on base and you're an all-star, the other 65% of those at bats, you need to find some way to make them productive. If you strike out, how many pitches are you seeing? If you get out, are you advancing runners? Mm-hmm. Are you working deep counts? Are you fouling pitches off? Are you tiring the starting pitcher? And I think that Mike Tauchman, the reason that he's up there, he has the perfect mentality to know his role. I mean, he knows that, when I'm 32 years old, I'm in an organization that has both corner outfielders signed for 3 years and 4 years respectively. I have Cody Bellinger here on a prove-it deal. I'm probably not going to play every day, but when I do, I'm going to do the same things that have got me here. I'm going to get on base at a 385 clip. I'm going to try to hit 270, and I'm going to see 7 pitches per at-bat and play good defense and run well. And just do what got him here. He's not going to do anything extraordinary, try to hit 3 home runs, but he's going to win you baseball games.
Yeah. Well, one thing I look back, obviously I followed that 2016 team and had so much fun with it. And we all remember Chris Bryant and Javi Baez and the young Wilson Contreras and those guys. But I think what really made things roll was having Ben Zobrist and Chris Coughlin and Tommy LaStella and Dexter Fowler be some of those guys in between the young, exciting players that would just grind in at bat.
Yeah, and even the catchers with Rossi and Miguel Montero.
Montero, yeah.
Yeah, it's just you need to have situational role players that aren't upset with not playing half the games in a series. That need to be okay when their number is called. I'm going to give in and give a quality at bat. If I'm a pitch runner, I'm going to take that extra base. Not everybody has that mentality. Some people struggle when they're not playing every day. You need, when you have a 26-man roster and 13 to 14 position players, you need complementary players to succeed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I guess to Morel, he kind of fits that mold. He's bounced around a lot, and lately I've heard he's not as comfortable being DH. I have to assume that's kind of the way he's such a ball of energy and just has too much time to.
Yeah, I mean, he's just so used to his athleticism being put full force. Like when you can run like him, throw like him, it's all like a mind rewiring. I think that he's at his best when his mind and his feet are working for 3 hours straight, not once every 3 innings.
Yeah. Where did he look best defensively? You probably see him in more positions than just about anybody.
I think that he's a really good athlete at third. I think there's a little bit of a long release point there with the throwing. I think that's something that they have been working on. I think his natural athleticism plays better in center. But I think that's something that he had never played center. He never played outfield. He was a second baseman, shortstop, and third baseman for the first 6 years of his professional career. Then you're going to thrust him and play center field up in the big leagues? Like, you need to see routes. You need to see the tilt of the baseball again. Right-handed hitters go this way. Left-handed hitters go this way. You need that experience. So I think when it's all said and done, I think the speed and the arm, if he can track the flight of the baseball and he can start improving his routes, I think his highest ceiling is probably in center.
Okay. Do you have a sense of I've been surprised this year, honestly, with the problems at third base, like literally not an inning. Were there things that you saw from him at third base that maybe a reason why the Cubs aren't playing him there? I know he played there some last year, and there were some throwing issues, but that seemed like an onslaught. Yeah.
I think the throwing motion's a little bit long. I mean, especially if you're playing back and you have speed guys from the left side, like it's something that you can get away here at the AAA level. You might not be able to get away at the big league level. So
Okay.
I think that you'll see him more at third, but I think that as of right now, when you're 3.5 games back, or when you're 3.5 games back in the division, you're going to play him wherever what fits.
Yes.
And I think you have to ride hot bats. Like, you're not going to play him in center right now because Mike Tauchman's hitting 400 over the last week. You're not going to play him at second because Nico Horner's there. You're not going to play him at short because Dansby Swanson's there. But when they have off days, like, they need somebody who can be a viable backup. And I think that he fits well for this Ben Zobrist role. I think you'll see him at third. I think you'll see him a little bit at second. I think you'll see him in the corners. I think you'll see him in center. So it'll be interesting to see where Christopher Morel projects for the rest of the season.
Yeah, and like you said earlier, if you hit, you'll play, and that bat plays.
Yeah, 3 hits yesterday. 9 home runs in his first 12 games. If you keep on doing that, they're going to find a way to put you into the lineup, even if it is DH.
For sure. I guess one other guy I want to hit on, Jake Slaughter is a guy I've heard more and more about, and again, probably to that third base position. I know he's been playing there a lot, and I think he was drafted as a second baseman, but again with that versatility. What have you seen from him this year? He's
such a good athlete. I mean, you look at him, and he's just like a burly guy. He's got like the long beard, and he's like 6'2", stocky, 225 pounds. I mean, he looks like he comes from a family of football players. He looks like an outside linebacker, which is not a position that you would say would reek of athleticism. But you look at his numbers. I mean, he's a 30 double guy. He's a 30 stolen base guy. Some of the plays that he's made at second and third, just like diving to his left, ranging onto the outfield grass, it kind of just makes you go like, whoa, like he can do that. Timely hitting, hitting with runners in scoring position. I think he's 4th in the league in RBIs this season. Was it 52 now? He drove in 2 game 1. He drove in 1 yesterday. So
that's right.
Power from the right side. I mean, by the end of the season, he could legit have 30 doubles, 25 steals, 20 homers.
Wow. And I know one of the challenges right now is the Cubs have it's the 40-man roster, right? I mean, they last year they had to add like Kevin Alcantara is probably a year or 2 away.
Yeah.
But you have to add him to the roster because he's absolutely getting taken in the Rule 5 draft if he's not protected.
Yeah.
There just aren't that many spots. And especially I know early in the season, fans were frustrated with Eric Hosmer, that type of thing. But they're, to bring up somebody like Slaughter, you have
to find a spot for him. I mean, then you have DFA utility player who's shown some value like Miles Mastroboni. And I know, people will be like, oh, that's easy, do that. Well, it's not that easy to find a guy who can put together a quality at bat that can play 6 positions.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't fall off trees. So I think the Cubs have a lot of guys like that at the AAA level that you want to see get their chance. I mean, they have the minor league hit king in Darius Hill last year. All Darius Hill does do is hit. And he's not even getting a sniff up in the big leagues right now. But I would love to see him go up there and, try to get a couple ABs and put, bat on baseball because he doesn't strike out much and he doesn't walk much. But then what are you going to do? DFA Mike Tauchman? You're not going to do that. There's just not enough space. 26-man roster. You have 30 to 35 qualified big leaguers in your organization, only 26 spots.
Yeah. I guess before we get out of here, who else is standing out that maybe we haven't talked about today that fans should maybe pay attention to?
Let me look at my roster. Jonathan Perlaza, probably the big one. Another guy that you see him, he's 5'10", 225 pounds, and just the most muscular human being ever. He looks like he should be playing football or a professional wrestler. And right
I saw him in the spring. He was just huge.
He's a beast. He's an absolute unit. And you see him hitting leadoff, and it's a little confusing because you would expect a guy like that to hit balls off the scoreboard. And he plays like a leadoff guy. He draws walks. He hits with runners in scoring position. He shortens up the stroke. He has a 400 on base percentage. He has a 23 game on base streak. So, a guy like that, where if you look at him, you're expecting lots of power, lots of strikeouts, 3 outcomes. And it's not like that. He leads the team in doubles, second on the team in hits, hitting over 300, just a quality hitter from both sides. And he hits everything hard. His exit velocity over the last month, when it started to heat up, he started to heat up. I mean, you see him hit a double off the left center field wall from the right side at 108, and I saw him the other day hit a ball from the left side 109. So to be able to do that from both sides and feel comfortable and track pitches that way, and early on in the season, his lefty splits were better again than his righties. Now it's almost even. He's a big league hitter. I wonder where he'll play. I still think he's trying to improve left field, right field. I mean, he was signed as a second baseman, but at some point, got to get hitters in the lineup of the big leagues, and he can hit from both sides.
It's a lot of fun to watch, and we didn't even talk about Ben Brown, but I've got a couple of his starts, and that dude's electric.
Absolutely electric. His last start, obviously 6 innings, 6 hits, 11 Ks, and he's still trying to figure out going from AA to AAA with the new baseball. Obviously, AA uses the tack ball, and sometimes he moves his grip and his arm slot, but you see him go 6 scoreless and strike out 11. He has 88 strikeouts and 58 in the third innings pitched this year. He's a special.
And no walks in that last start.
None. No, he's a competitor. He's a special arm. He's a special kid. He's a really, really, really good dude. And he's somebody that you would want to factor into your rotation for a long, long time. They struck gold with that trade. They did.
Yeah, I thought they did great last year getting him and Hayden Wesneski.
They did, and I'm a big Efros guy too. I mean, Scott.
I love Efros.
I mean, he was one of my favorite iCubs that I've had here in 5 years. But you get a guy who could factor in your rotation for the next 10 years. I mean, that type of stuff is almost irreplaceable. So to have Ben Brown, Hayden Wesneski, even Caleb Killian still, Jordan Wicks in AA, Cubs rotation is in good shape.
Yeah, and Assad is the guy that I think is often overlooked, but he was just money for the Cubs down the stretch, and he looked amazing in the World Baseball Classic.
Yep. No, he's a guy that has shown can now do 2 roles. Now he's a long guy too. He can go back to starting. I mean, he provides a lot of flexibility. I mean, it's almost like a mini Keegan Thompson situation where he started up in the big leagues, he threw well, then they threw him in the bullpen in long stints, and they threw him in the bullpen in short stints, and he succeeded. Now, obviously, Keegan is here right now working on some stuff, but having guys in the organization who can provide that versatility, that's really nice to have.
I think it's cool too for these guys that even if it doesn't wind up working out with the Cubs, if they get caught on the wrong side of a numbers game or they're sent off in a trade, showing that versatility, they're going to catch somewhere. We're going to hear about Javier Assad or Keegan Thompson either with the Cubs over the next 5-6 years or somewhere else.
Yeah, I mean, I think that Keegan's a big arm for the Cubs, a guy who they drafted high, who was pitching high leverage situations. He was their best reliever last year.
Oh, he was so good.
He was so good. And I think that getting him back to being Keegan and being comfortable and getting the cutter back and throwing the curveball for strikes and that fastball to 94, 96, I think he is a bullpen and a team-changing arm when things click. I like Javi. I think he's really good. I think that he could be a back end of the bullpen or back end of the starting rotation starter. I think he could be a middle reliever. I think Keegan can be a back end of the bullpen guy.
Yeah,
I think he's a pretty big deal.
Great. Well, thanks for coming on today. Where can people find you?
You can find me on Twitter at Voice of Cohen 2. It used to be at Voice of Cohen. I have been hacked. My messages to Elon have gone unanswered, unfortunately. So, but yeah, at Voice of Cohen 2. You can also find us at iowacubs.com. You can watch us on the Valley Live app. You can watch us for 10 more games on Marquee Sports Network. And just follow the Iowa Cubs at Iowa Cubs on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Great. It's so great to be able to see all the minor league action that we couldn't see 5-6 years ago. No, and just seeing that the way the Cubs organization is when it comes to minor league talent, all 4 full season minor league teams are over 500 and they have some studs on them. So if you're not watching Iowa Cubs games, I hope you're watching Tennessee Smokies games. I hope you're watching South Bend Cubs games and Myrtle Beach Pelicans game because there is a lot of talent in this organization. Who's throwing tonight for Iowa? I think it's Riley Thompson, top 30 guy. Cool. Yeah, I looked this morning. It wasn't announced yet, so. Yeah, I think Riley Thompson's going today, and when you have 3 straight games of Ben Brown, Caleb Killian, and Riley Thompson, that's pretty tough for the opposition. Yes, it is. Well, thanks for coming on the show. Thanks for having me on. Really appreciate it. Thanks. Thank you for joining me today. If you liked the discussion, or maybe especially if you didn't, please drop a rating and review wherever it is you get your podcasts, or tell a friend about the show. Just a few seconds from you gives me great feedback and helps other Cub fans find the show. You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube, all at CubsPS+. And check out the Patreon page, CubsPSplus.patreon.com, to help support the show and keep it ad-free.
This is Mike Waller, host of the CubsPS Plus podcast. Every day with Cubs baseball or talking about Cubs baseball is a great day. Go Cubs!